Again, trying out this new, streaming screen sharing app. First and foremost, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushai, Bahashem, Rakah, Kodash, double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone. And salutations to Akim pushing his word in all sincerity and now truth. Shalom, shalom. Hopefully, this life goes well. If not, I'll just do a regular video and upload. So this lesson is pretty much just going back into the MOTB system and the infrastructure that's being built and the different techniques or the different schemes that are being used to move the agenda forward, right? And one of them, that would seem to be disconnected is the social media ban that's being implemented in various countries. Whether they're banning under 16 or are they pushing for social media verification. How does this all tie into the MOTB system? Because of course we can't be ignorant to Satan's devices. We have to know what's going on as we see these different things popping off. How does this relate to prophecies, right? So I asked the question, how can social media ban for teens and children be used to forward a digital ID agenda? Right? So it says the idea that social media bans for minors are being used to push a broader digital ID agenda is a prominent argument made by privacy advocates, civil liberty groups, and digital rights researchers. While lawmakers often promote these bans as a protective mechanism for youth mental health and safety, critics point out that the mechanical requirements of enforcing mandatory age ban logically mandate universal identity verification. Because how are you going to know who are the kids from who are adults? You're going to need everybody's information, and that's how you're going to choose who are kids and who are not, right? The legal catch-22, age assurance requires identification. To enforce a law that bans under 16s or under 18 from platforms, like laws in Australia, across Europe, and some US states, platforms cannot simply rely on self-reported birth date. Because users lie, platforms face massive financial penalties unless they implement age assurance, right? So some demand government-issued IDs, biometric verification, third-party digital wallets, right? Even if the law only targets minors, adults must also upload identification to prove they are not children, right? Now, how does this tie into, the digital, infrastructure? So it says building identity verification infrastructure from scratch is expensive and massive data security liability for individual tech companies. To streamline this, governments and private sectors are deploying centralized or state-approved digital identity frameworks. For instance, EIDAS 2.0 or EU digital identity wallets. European frameworks aim to give citizens a government-backed digital wallet that can authenticate their age or identity across private platforms without revealing extra data, right? And then it says the child safety leverage, which is the Trojan horse argument, right? In political strategy, child protection is one of the most effective policy levers available. Bills marketed as protecting kids online or kids' safety carry high emotional weight, right? Making it politically difficult for lawmakers to vote against them without looking like they don't care about children, right? So again, you have to be aware of the schemes of the devil, right? Of the wiles of the devil, right? So how then does this tie into UN Digital Compact, right, which came out of the Pact for the Future that they signed in 2024, I believe, to reconfirm their dedication to bringing about the 2030 agenda, right? It says connecting youth social media bans to the UN Digital Compact and the World Bank's Identification for Development, ID4D, right, reveals how local enforcement mechanisms plug directly into a global architecture. So while you see different countries are implementing this seemingly in their own way, it's all part of a global agenda, right? No country is doing this in isolation or because of their own goodwill. While use social media ban is a local or national legislative policy, the Global Digital Compact and ID4D represent the global technical and governance infrastructure designed to make identity verifiable across the internet. Right? So the stated goal of the Global Digital Compact, right, is to promote digital public infrastructure, which is digital identity, instant payment system, which your CBDC is going to, and data exchange network, which is your 6G, right? The social media tie-in. The Global Digital Compact places heavy emphasis on combating online harm, protecting minors, and building a quote-unquote safe digital space. To enforce the safety standards that international treaties like the GDC outline, platforms need a universal way to know who is behind a screen. So no more anonymity online, right? So World Bank's ID4D project, right? So if the GDC is the policy vision, the World Bank's ID4D, which is Identification for Development project, is the hardware and financial engine, right? ID4D works primarily with developing nations to provide government-recognized digital ID to the roughly 800 million people who lack official identification. So they'll go to countries, they work with countries like Jamaica, other Caribbean countries, countries in Southeast Asia, countries in Central America, South America, countries in Africa, right? And they'll help them to build, they'll help to plan, fund, and build a digital ID framework that fits into, the plan of the UN 2030 agenda. So they don't be doing their own thing, right? How the pieces fit together. The demand, social media bans, right? A government passed a law saying under 16s cannot use social media, like in the UK, like in France, like in Australia, right? Certain states in the US. Platforms face massive fines if they fail to verify every user's age. The bottlenecks. Platform realized that traditional age checks like uploading a driver's license trigger massive data privacy lawsuits and hacker targets. Right? The solution, ID4D system. The World Bank and Digital Identity Standards Group step in with digital public infrastructure. They offer decentralized digital wallets where a government digitally signs an age credential. Right? And they have the harmonization, the convergence, right? While the UN and the World Bank frame digital identity as a tool for human rights and economic inclusion, youth safety laws provide the regulatory enforcement that bring these systems to high-income, highly connected societies, right? So now connect all of this now to the push for CBDCs, tokenization, and 6G. So you have to see how the different webs that are seemingly not connected are all actually interconnected. Right? So it says connecting youth social media bans to central bank digital currencies, asset tokenization, and 6G telecommunication completes the architecture of what global policy like the Bank of International Settlements, BIS, International Monetary Fund, IMF, and United Nations, UN, refer to as digital public infrastructure. While social media age bans look like an isolated social or child safety policy, they operate as an entry-level gatekeeper for a broader, hyper-connected digital economic stack. You need a way to enter in. You get a foothold in, right? And how do you do it? You do it like by policy, like this social media ban, because it is unquestionable that social media is messing with people, especially young people, right? Anxiety is at a high rate, depression, suicidal thoughts, lack of social skills, lack of vocabulary skills. There's so many different things that you can point to say, okay, social media is bad for young people, bad for everybody in general, but more so for young undeveloped brains, although many adults have undeveloped brains, to be honest. But hey, so you see the bad, and it's being allowed to propagate, right? And the negative side effects or the negative effects have been pushed in the media to say, yes, social media for kids is bad, so that when they come with a law like this, you say, yeah, we definitely really and truly need, protection for our kids, right? Even if it means giving up my right to privacy, right? So that they can then use this as what? As an entry level gatekeeper for a broader hyperconnected digital system, right? So it says here's how they connect. So identity gateway, financial engine, physical network. So you have a verified digital ID. Your CBDCs and tokenized assets would be a programmable money, and your 6G would be a real-time physical tracking, right? So the digital ID, your access to the system, the connection, right? Mandatory age verification for social media establishes the legal precedent and technological habit of submitting a government-backed digital credential. The function, it strips away pseudonymous web access, right? Your digital identity becomes the root key required to interact with both web platforms and monetary networks. So once you are online, whether you're on your phone, your laptop, your tablet, whatever it is, once you are online, there's a digital fingerprint that goes with it to say, okay, John Brown is online, John Brown processed this, John Brown watched this video, John Brown liked this post, John Brown forwarded this post, all that, right? The financial engine, CBDCs and tokenization, right? Once an individual's identity is established at the root layer, it interfaces directly with modern financial rails, right? So unlike traditional physical cash or standard commercial bank deposits, CBDCs are direct sovereign digital liabilities of a central bank. Because they are digital software, they can be programmed, right? Let me just jump down to the synergy. Once a tokenized unified ledger, transactions are executed via smart contracts that require know your customer identity for compliance, but built directly into the transaction layer. A tokenized asset or CBDC cannot execute unless the underlying digital ID wallet confirms the sender and receiver satisfies specific legal, regulatory, or age conditions. And then you have the physical network, right, which is a 6G, and that gives you joint communication and sensing, which is ubiquitous tracking, right? Meaning the 6G networks are able to track physical movements, environmental objects, and spatial position in real time without needing cameras. The very network around you that you're going to use to communicate back and forth and access the internet will be able to track your position and your movement without cameras. Can you think about that? There's no way you're going to be able to escape. Instantaneous synchronization, zero-edge computing. So then the synthesis. All right, let me just go down to the key takeaway. Social media bans are not an isolated legal debate. They are the public-facing adoption catalyst for digital ID. Meaning, this is what we put in your face to move our system along, to accelerate the adoption of the digital system that's coming. This is what we put in your face as the justification for bringing in this system. Problem, reaction, solution. Right? Once a population relies on a digital credential to access communication network, that same identity naturally serves as the terminal for programmable CBDCs, tokenized property records, and hyper-connected infrastructure. And there's so many different countries that issue it, right? So you can, how does this display the Hegelian dialectic? Because this is something that we've been talking about for years, right? That this is how they move policy along when it's unpopular, right? So let's look at it. So it just gives you the synopsis of what the Hegelian dialectic is, which is a three-stage process, which pretty much goes down to problem, reaction, solution, right? So the thesis, anonymity and free-for-all internet model. The antithesis, which is the problem, crisis and panic over minor harm, mental health, safety crisis, right? The synthesis, mandatory digital ID. So stage one, Right, the thesis, the state of affairs. For decades, the foundational paradigm of the consumer web was open, low friction, largely pseudonymous, meaning you don't have to really identify yourself online. You can create fake users and all of that. Right? Anyone with an email address could create an account on a social network, forum, or digital platform without presenting any credentials. The precondition: this environment fostered rapid network growth, massive data monetization for big tech, and absolute baseline anonymity for the public. However, it lacked inherent identity verification mechanisms. Stage 2, the antithesis or the antithesis, right? Which is the contradiction or the crisis. Never let a crisis go to waste, right? Says the unmonitored nature of the open web exposes fundamental vulnerabilities. Cyberbullying, youth mental health deterioration, predatory behavior, right? Exposure to adult content, algorithmic addiction among children. The political frame, the problem. The open internet model is declared fundamentally unsafe and broken. Lawmakers, parent groups, and legacy media highlight the real or perceived systemic harm created by unverified online access. The impasse: we cannot leave children unprotected in an unregulated digital wilderness. Self-regulation by tech platforms fails, generating massive public demand for state intervention. Right? Stage 3, the synthesis. Right? The digital public infrastructure. To solve the crisis, while preserving access to digital platforms, a new structural paradigm is introduced. Mandatory age verification and verifiable digital credentials. How the tension resolves: you cannot protect children without knowing who is a child. You cannot know who is a child without verifying the age of everyone. Platforms cannot legally or technically verify everyone using fragmented upload forms without facing massive data liability or security risks. The resulting synthesis: the implementation of state-sanctioned cryptographic digital ID wallets and interoperable public infrastructure, such as the eIDAS 2.0 in the EU or the national digital ID schemes. The original state of anonymous access is the opposing problem of unmitigated online harm, cancelling out anonymity while keeping digital access intact via a brand new system of verified identity gates. Right? Why political theorists highlight this factor? Because, so they know what they're saying. Critical analysts point to this dynamic as a classic example of manufactured Hegelian dialectic. Right? So this thing is not by coincidence. Right? So here we go. An illustration of how these real-world testing errors play out during enforcement rollouts can be viewed in ABC News Australia reports on age verification misidentification. The video highlights the technical friction and accuracy limitation platforms face when attempting biometric age estimation during Australia's monetary ban, illustrating why governments and tech companies increasing the push for official government digital ID as the ultimate solution. Right? So, I mean, it's there. It's there. And we have to be able to see these things. We have to be able to see Esau's tricks for what they are. And we have to be able to see, when these things happen in the news, know how these connect to prophecy. So hopefully, this lesson was edifying. Now, till next time,